So I'm Alex, and this is Keir.
Yeah. All good.
You were a little poorly before. Was it toxins coming out of your? Sorry, I had to put that joke in there.
Not quite. I think it was just an old-fashioned cold, nothing too exciting. Just kind of made it a little bit hard for me to. My voice was all messed up, wasn't it? It was like like you could barely hear what I was saying. So it was like a sort of swollen throat or something like that.
We're not going to make a movie about that one.
No, it would actually be a really boring movie.
Yeah.
The swollen throat.
Oh my god.
Yeah, exactly. Now, what I wanted to talk to you, I like to keep it fairly brief, actually, and I like to focus on writing, which is my speciality as well. But so the plot, for anyone who hasn't seen it yet, is Dakota and Axel are dating, and I think they're living together, aren't they, as well? And Dakota wants to do the dirty on him in the sense that she wants to dump him. And Axel finds out by accident, and he takes it like a man. No, he doesn't. He starts emitting this toxin, and he starts trying to figure out how he can sort of subvert her plan. He becomes a little manipulative, but the toxins comes in, I think, as a metaphor. And so the metaphor, it expresses the theme as well. Do I have that about right so far, or do I just sound like an idiot?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, like, they've been in a relationship for a couple of years now, and then we flash back and forward. We flash to like the better parts of their relationship, and then it contextualizes why maybe things have started falling apart in the present, and his patch starts to burn skin, and it is, you know, the toxic relationship, if you will, becomes literal.
Yeah. That was a question I had, actually. I'm skipping forward a few questions, but that was a question I had, because there was some cutaways, and I think you tried to, well, you did a different thing with the structure, and I wasn't sure in some cases whether it was a flash forward to a very, very dysfunctional, even more dysfunctional relationship where they didn't make that clean break that they clearly both needed, and so they were flashbacks, were they? All of them.
Yeah, everything's a flashback. So there's the past and the present. There's the two kind of timelines.
Like the main giveaway is Dakota's hair, but you see over time, especially towards the end, the past and the present are bleeding more and more together, bringing us more up to speed. So you kind of see her transformation throughout their relationship, where she becomes less and less like herself.
Yeah. So, and this is a thing that we spoke about before as well, because in a way he seemed a bit more toxic just because he was the one more in denial. She was more, I suppose her toxicity was a bit different, because the way that she was going to dump him was going to be quite damaging to him as well. And when you damage someone like that, it makes it difficult for someone to move on. So it's not that clean break that she said that she wanted. So she had her own version of toxicity as well. But were you going for a completely symmetrical there, because he's the one that emits the toxins as well? So were you concerned with making it symmetrical and saying, you know, there's no good guy, no bad guy here, or was it?
Well, I think our idea was this notion of that they're both actually, you know, equally at fault in the relationship. The thing that makes Dakota ostensibly the protagonist is the fact that she's motivated to end the relationship. So that is the thing that ultimately is the thing that is taking Axel over, and, you know, poisoning him, is the fact that he can't let it go. So I think ultimately, while they are both very much at fault in the relationship, it is Dakota who at least sees that the relationship needs to end.
To what degree would you say that, because they both seem to have a need to control, the way that she's going to dump him is very curated, and it's almost sociopathic in that sense. So she rightly gets called out by Rose, I think, and he very much has a desire to control as well. You kind of see that in the sex scene where that's a moment where she wants to lose control because she's into the sadomasochism part, and he kind of does this kind of weird, and maybe I've got this wrong as well, or maybe this is open to interpretation. He does this kind of virtue signaling, you know, you're into this kinky stuff and I'm not, and think it's wrong kind of vibe. To what degree do you think they both have this need to control? Do you think that's part of their toxicity as well?
I would say that, if you don't mind me saying so, like that's conflating things a little bit.
Okay.
So I would agree on the sadomasochism side of things, because there's two instances. There's what they've done in their relationship when they were happy versus what he's then accusing her of later on and using against her, even though they were at the time in the past on the same side. So, and as far as, you know, our interpretation of everything is, you know, I think especially when you like Dakota enjoys masochism and submissive, people often misunderstand that being a submissive is letting go. Actually, the submissive is usually the person who's more in control if you're in a good setup, basically, because kind of make the rules in many ways. So from that perspective, yes, Dakota does have like controlling elements to her in that she likes things a certain way. And I think the relationship is new to her in that way. In terms of her coming across as maybe sociopathic, I think the thing is there's a reference to, and it is a passing line, but there's a reference to that Dakota has tried to break up with Axel before. So she's trying to do something a little bit more brutal because she's like, otherwise it's never going to end. And that's where the push and pull comes from. So I think the thing is that they both want to grow together, but it just doesn't fit. They still want to be their own people too much and too rigid.
I think the thing too is that she's essentially worked out a speech in order to give to Axel in order to tell him why they should break up. Actually more because it's a very difficult and emotionally vulnerable place. So I actually think if she was sociopathic, she would just kind of go, no, we're over, I'm leaving. You know, I think it's the fact that it's so difficult means that she has to have she has to create a script in order to be able to express what she means, because it's going to be too hard emotionally to do it unless she has some kind of like organization to it. And she needs to practice that. And I think, you know, we've all kind of experienced those things where things are hard and you end up practicing in the mirror how you're going to say this to somebody or how you're going to actually be able to implement something. But I think
and then it never works. It never works out like it does in the movies, does it? Like you don't get to have the I told you so speech. And I like, that's what I like so much about when she tries to actually perform it and he's like, what the fuck are you on about? Talk to me as a human being. And she's like, fuck no, I had a thing. And he's like, I don't give a shit. You know what I mean? Like that's not real life.
Well, I think
but sometimes, I mean, I know I love to have a script. I love to have a script that I can learn, but it never quite works out. In real life, unfortunately, people don't stay told off is the point. Like, it's like, I think we all like this idea that somebody's going to say something to us and then we come back with the withering comeback. And then they just like in a movie, they just stay, they just look sad. And like I've been put in my place. You cut to the heart of me, but people just, arguments just cycle and rotate and just never end. On that point, I think it's fair to say that, we wanted, I guess the film we made is a testament to the messiness of relationships in that way. And that is something that we wanted to represent, both visually and through the script. So, it's not always going to land with people. Some people really love it. But then other people are like, but no, it's not enough like a movie and blah. But it's like, I guess it's just a different kind of movie.
Yeah, there's a toxicity. I guess the slight danger with the word toxic is it sounds judgmental, and I think that the film does an excellent job of not judging anyone. It's they're not totally bad people. They're certainly bad for each other by the end. Do you think that there is a Mr. Right for Dakota and a Miss Right for Axel, or would they have to go away and work on themselves?
We've often said that, they might have even been right for each other at a different point in time, but it's just that, I think there are lessons that they both still have to learn. I don't know if you have something else. I think I more go from the standpoint that I'm not really sure I believe in the concept of a Mr. Right or a Miss or a Ms. Right or a whatever for people. I think that people come together at times in their lives and,
they meet people who are either going the same path or suit them at that moment in time. And then I think relationships then become a lot about how people grow together and work together
and choose each other.
And choose each
So
other.
I think that's part of it, is like, I do think that a lot of what I learned through this film was, I was like, oh no, like love and a relationship is really very much about maintenance. So you can make it really hard work, or you can, like a garden, maintain it more regularly. And then
that's the bit I've always been
because, you know, at the end of the day, we've been in a relationship for 11 years. It's not like it doesn't come without its challenges, but I think I lost my point.
Well, I think the thing is about it a lot of the time is it's just like, I think it's very easy for, I think the biggest problem with Dakota and Axel is that they both try to make the relationship suit them in some kind of capacity rather than working together and finding common ground. And I think that's the reality, is I don't think that there's a right person for everybody in a vacuum. I think it's about how people relate to each other and how they grow together, ultimately, is how relationships work.
Yeah. And I think I was just trying to speak to that idea of choosing someone every day. And I realized that means, and I do feel like I do choose you every day. I think it's kind of that thing of like never taking each other for granted to an extent.
What drew you to the idea of toxicity? Because it's an idea that you really exploit very well. It must have drawn you to it. Are you aware, or did it just sort of happen organically? Or
it kind of grew out of the zombie idea.
Yeah,
the zombie idea.
We had an idea initially because we needed to make a film that was in a single location with minimal cast, and we had this idea that was kind of about what if you were trapped in a house with a zombie, like one zombie, and like your whole thing was you just had to kill this one zombie. And it was you know, and you know, as you're looking at that, you know, you kind of go, okay, well, it's more interesting if the person is like turning into a zombie. It's more interesting if the person has a relation to the zombie. So maybe the zombie is her boyfriend or her husband or something like that.
Tall fella.
And then as you go, well, and then as you sort of start looking at that, you go, well, you know, what are the emotional stakes and what are the things that you can do that makes that situation more dramatic and more interesting? And then eventually we got to the point where we just kind of went, well, the zombie, once they become a zombie, it kind of becomes limiting. They can't really, like, they don't get to, you lose a lot of drama and they just become a monster at that point, and that became less interesting to us. So that was the point where the zombie started then turning into a more of our own kind of like monster or creature in some kind of way, something with a bit more humanity to them.
It's interesting as well, because we weren't necessarily sure towards the end of the film how much Axel was still going to be a human or a monster. Like, was he going to be more like, oh, you know, like, ooh, all changed, or was he still going to be more like himself? And like the further along we went, the more we were like, because we were aiming for a little bit of that balance that you were talking about, is we were going to lose everyone completely if Axel finally is getting his say, but he's being really like strange and maybe people can't relate to him as much anymore. It just felt like it would be doing his character a disservice. And one of the things that we've found really nice is that even from some people that we were definitely expecting to just side with Dakota from the outset until the end, they came back and they said, you know, I hate to say this, but Axel did have a couple good points, and I hate that.
Surprisingly, a lot of women are very like pro Axel. That was kind of the big shock.
All right. I'm surprised because you did a short film called Sucker, and it seemed to me that it had the same idea in the sense that somebody brings something home, and part of what makes that toxic is that they're not dealing with it. They're not recognizing that it's a messed up situation with this growth. So I was wondering if it was an idea that had been sort of kicking around for some time, or maybe it was something you were drawing from, you know, the political sphere or the film industry, because both of those have their versions of toxicity as well, or maybe you weren't consciously doing that, but maybe it was there in the background.
I mean, we've been making monster movies on and off basically for about 5 years. So I think we were definitely drawing on past work like Wretch as well, but definitely also Sucker, combining that with the drama, I guess, of Portrait. So it's like we would definitely try to work to our strengths. So it doesn't surprise, like they definitely all work as a piece. I can speak to Sucker because I wrote Sucker. Is that Sucker is more because you hit the nail on the head, is it's like they're in denial about, and like, you know, whether you want to read it as depression or, you know, an illness that they just don't want to like really acknowledge or seek help with, and that spirals out of control unless you let someone in. In that instance, it's two sisters, and everything's a little bit too late as they realize they might be able to help each other. But that one's definitely more of like a Rorschach test, I think, for people. I like to have people say what their own spin on it is. That's more about like familial troubles, I guess. But yeah, I mean, there's always been an element of, I think we've definitely like influenced each other over the years as well, where I think a lot of the work that we've made, especially in the horror sphere, has been more about like exercising those inner demons. You know, when I just remember as a teenager, as a bit of a tangent, but as a teenager, I just remember like feeling all of these feelings. And I was like, if only people could see how much I'm hurting on the inside, on the outside, then people wouldn't be so mean. And I think like a little bit of my work anyway kind of expresses that. And that's what I love about film, is like you're finding ways to visualize pain and catharsis and exploration of all of that.
I mean, I think it's just like inevitable too, that there's just themes that interest you, that you come back to, that fascinate you. And I think especially, you know, dealing with things in a short film, you know, when it comes to making a feature film, it's cool because it was a short film that you've dealt with these themes in before. So you know, you're open to be able to explore them even further and do more with them and take them in all sorts of different directions.
Yeah. Okay. I wanted to move on a bit to screenwriting craft, because I think that gets a little bit under spoken about in general. But I've got some quotes because the toxin part is a metaphor for another kind of toxicity, isn't it? So here's a quote. So I've got two quotes. One of them is, "People who talk in metaphors ought to shampoo my crotch." That's Melvin Udall from played by Jack Nicholson in As Good as It Gets. I'm going to turn that into a meme. But that said, here's the opposite take. "But the greatest thing by far is to have command of metaphor. This alone cannot be imparted by another. It is the mark of genius, for to make good metaphors implies an eye for resemblances." And that's Aristotle from his book Poetics. But you drove for the metaphor quite hard, probably even more hard than something like Alien or American Psycho as metaphors for, you know, excess capitalism or corrupt capitalism. Do you want to talk a bit more about your process behind that? Why you made the choices you did there?
Well, I think you know, for me personally, I can say that I grew up, you know, watching a lot of reruns of The Twilight Zone. I was always just very interested in the way in which, you know, genre can work in allegory. Like one of my favorite books of all time is Ray Bradbury's The Illustrated Man. I you know, and The Illustrated Man's not a subtle book. Like the Twilight Zone is not subtle in what it's doing. But I enjoyed that element of it. I always enjoyed that idea of you take something out of its setting and then you make it more potent through this kind of like bigger, grander idea. And I think like for us, we look a lot at things as kind of like having something more of an operatic kind of like reality to it. It's like it's big, heightened, you know, emotions. And I just think like, you know, and I can understand why there's people who don't like metaphor. I can understand why there's people who think it's high art. I just say for us, it makes sense. And I'm a great believer that you know, with art, there should be no rules. It's just kind of whatever works. If at the end of it, something speaks to you and it's good, great. If you don't like it, then that's fine as well. It's kind of like, it's all about trying to, you know, give an audience, give a viewer something that they can react to or get something out of. And that's kind of like, how I see it. I don't know. I actually don't speak for Alix on this.
Oh, no. I mean, you make a good point. I think the thing is, like, a lot of our work, and Kelly Lover is true to this, is we are seeking to cause a reaction in people. So in order to cause a reaction in people, you have to take things quite far, I tend to find. That goes for the sound design as well as the music. We're maximalists, I think,
definitely.
Maximalists on a budget. But, we were like, we're not going to let that stop us. And, I think what's great and fun about it is, it's a full expression of what we were looking to do.
Yeah.
And we really wanted to get to some of like those more intense kills as well. And so I think if it had been any less dialed up to 11, it wouldn't have necessarily, it could have been quite jarring in parts. So I think that's it, is we always intended to play in a heightened world, and we had a lot of fun doing it.
That's the part that I think that worked for me. That's what made it feel fresh. It made it feel genuinely different. And I love a pure genre piece and a good structure and all that kind of things. But I really like it when someone tries something else. So I thought that was really well. I've just got a few questions left, if that's okay.
Great.
In terms of, so you co-wrote this together, didn't you?
Yeah.
What was your, because I'm fairly new to co-writing as well, but I've just started something with my long-suffering writing partner as well on a short, and it's actually been a really good process as well. But what is your process? Do you do this kind of Elton John, Bernie Taupin? No. I mean, Ben Elton and Richard Curtis. Their writing partnership on Blackadder. They would rewrite each other's scenes. What was your process on writing it and redrafting?
Well, I would say, like, this probably isn't what it would be like on every film, but for this particular film, Keir and I shared the directing team aspects completely, and then I tend to say we both co-produced and co-wrote the film, but I led on the producing side and you led on the writing side, at least initially, and then we found each other in the middle. So at least from the writing perspective, you built the structure initially, and then it was about coming into the room with ideas and then it kind of going back and forth from there.
The best way that I could put it is, like, if you gave us a solid block of marble, and that solid block is like the thing you have to chisel the script out of. I took, a giant sledgehammer to it and just like smashed it into some kind of like shape. And then Alix really came in and started like chiseling it and smoothing it and making it look like things. And even to a certain extent, reshaping parts of it to kind of like make it look more like what it needed to look like. And I think it can be very easy sometimes to go, well, I put down an 85-page script and as a first draft, and so therefore I did the vast majority of the writing. But I actually think that where things really sort of like change and come into it is kind of like when you start really sort of like shaping and changing a lot of those. And one of the big things that Alix did was, I think, it's very easy when you're writing a first draft to get into this whole kind of mindset of, okay, well, this is this type of character, this is this type of character. And I think what we ended up with was Dakota is the protagonist. She's the good guy. Axel is diseased. He is bad. He is the bad guy. And I think that you were really the one who came in and just went, you know what? I think we need to make Dakota a little bit more of an asshole, I think was the way you kind of put it.
Another way to put it is complex.
Definitely more complex.
Because everyone's always like, strong female character. And I'm like, no, complex female character.
Yeah. And I think you also wanted to make Axel, by contrast, more sympathetic, and it was that very much that kind of thing of like we kind of very much reshaped the characters more towards having much more of a middle ground and a more sort of like gray sort of like conflict, rather than what was originally more of a straightforward kind of like good guy bad guy situation.
Yeah, which would have also worked, but I think we decided
we
decided that what we ended up with was more interesting.
It was better. What's your favorite?
Well, that's
have you seen the film War of the Roses?
Yes. We actually watched it in
Yes.
prep for
Yes.
when we watched it in prep before making the film.
Yeah, on a superficial level, it's actually it's a very different film as well. But it pops in my head as well. Would you say that your film has a moral as such, or is it just an exploration around that theme of toxicity?
I think it's not a straightforward moral, because I think the thing is, like, a lot of it ends up, like, the metaphor is, fairly straightforward, like that. It's the surface, if you will, but then underneath the surface is this sort of whole mess of death by 1,000 cuts, if you will. It's not one big thing that ends it, it's everything that adds up into this kaleidoscopic just conundrum and ball of energy that eventually explodes. So I think ultimately, I mean, I definitely have definitely said, I kind of hope that this film breaks people up that aren't meant to be together. I have definitely been heard saying that.
I think that's the way you can
Oh
put
my
it.
God.
It's moral and more of a thesis.
I know, terrible.
I think you'd say it has more thesis than moral, in the sense that it's really about this notion of, like, most relationships are not about good guys and bad guys. They're about two people who fundamentally shouldn't be together, and those things are not necessarily about one big thing that happened or one thing. It's about two people growing apart over time and all the little things that add up to why they shouldn't be together.
And the relationship becoming a monster, not either party being at fault per se, but the relationship becoming a monster, recognizing it as such, and making I think, an active decision what to do with that, rather than just letting it lie and letting it rot you from the inside out. Yeah. So just like, self-awareness, I guess. Be self-aware. No, I don't know.
Well, it's like I say, it's a really refreshing film, and a really refreshing take on that theme as well. So I'm glad that I watched it and hung around Romford Film Festival. And I just wanted to ask you, what's next for the film?
So for the film, we've got a couple deals on the table for UK distribution. So we're really looking forward to, being able to, show it to the people who, are in the film. They did get to watch it at Glasgow Fright Fest, which was great as well. But it's been to festivals like Overlook, and it was the opening night film at Brooklyn Horror last year. So it's out in North America for anyone who's watching in North America. You can get it on VOD on various platforms. And I think there's a potential London screening on the horizon that we're just trying to lock down at the moment. Just because we were like, you know what? We need a London premiere. So we're barreling towards that. So once we have more news, we'll absolutely share that.
Okay. And what about next projects?
Next projects, I mean,
do you want
the long version or the short version? We've got several scripts written, which is good. It's one of the things that we really wanted to have as we were on the festival circuit, so that we could answer the question, what's next? There's two projects that are being looked at by production companies, is sort of the short version. One of them is being developed, and one of them is being looked at being made wholesale, and that's the one that we're sort of driving towards, like a steam train on a mission, because we're like, yes, we're going to get another one off the ground. We're not going to, wait around. So that one would hopefully be the next one. That one's umbilical.
Yeah, and that's basically like what we did to relationships with Kill Your Lover. We would look to do motherhood
and
with
pregnancy.
And pregnancy with umbilical.
Oh God! Oh, so it's maybe in the same ballpark as Prevenge or something like that. But
it's a pregnancy possession movie, but it's.
I said more like, if you've ever seen the French movie Baby Blood, it's probably a bit more like that. More like that.
Yeah, and for anyone who's watched Upgrade, which everyone should see, it's more.
It's got some Upgrade qualities to it.
Bug nuts.
Yeah.
Evil Dead energy, rather than too self-reflective, if that makes sense.
So there.
Gosh.
Yeah, I think so.
Well,
I think there's lag.
yeah, there's lag,
Yes.
lag right at the end. Yeah. Well, those are all the questions I had. Alix and Keir, sorry for the lag, but thank you for the insights into your film. And I can't wait to see what happens with it, and I can't wait to see what happens with your next projects as well. So
No worries. Thank you
thanks
for having us. Thank you for the great questions.
Thank you. So talk to you soon. Thank you.